doorbell at Jimmy's house. Now, when you come to my house, my doorbell sounds like this.
Hey, welcome to PeoplesRadioUnited.com, the Peoples Weekly. I'm Tim Best Buds. I'm here with Canadian Glenn, Nolan Hack, and Miko Hayes. How are you guys doing?
Doing good. Thanks for having me, as always, Tim.
Good afternoon, A.
Canadian Glenn is back from his vacation, so welcome back, Glenn.
Thank you. Good to be back. Vacation from hell is over.
That didn't sound good. And Miko you were out at Irma helping people out? I don't know what happened to Miko.
Sir.
Oh, there he is.
Sorry, I'm messaging with one of my streamers down in St. Louis at the same time.
Yeah, that's the news of the day, the Jason Stockley verdict. So yeah, I think Gal and Top are going to be joining us soon. So you want to run through what everybody's kind of working on, and then we'll move on to the Stockley verdict.
Sounds good.
Whoever want to go first can go. Nolan, go.
Yeah. Well, we're close to October, and I, as I've said on the show before, am putting together a big national project with a whole number of people. Tim's involved. Gal, who's also a regular on the show, is involved. And the half that I can talk about is we are going after the curriculum in American schools, mainly middle schools and high schools, and mainly history and social studies. I have a thread that I've retweeted a few times that shows you how disgusting the information that is being taught to children is. And you're talking about straight lies we're teaching to children. And this is how Jason Stockley turns into Jason Stockley. This is how Donald Trump turned into Donald Trump. I mean, in one of the bigger textbooks, history textbooks in America, in terms of widely produced in high schools, they try to make an argument for why Christopher Columbus was a hero. This man's responsible for about 15 million deaths. He started a genocide that's still going on, which has resulted in over 100 million deaths of indigenous people. In the last couple of days, I read one passage from a book about the native boarding schools, and they called the boarding schools a clashing of two cultures. Now, if you know anything about the boarding schools, native children were sexually abused, rampant sexual abuse. Sometimes they would electrocute the children just for fun, like literal, just for, kicks and giggles. And there's a Michigan textbook talking about the history of Michigan. They teach the kids. They call native genocide evolution. So, according to that particular textbook, and what they're teaching kids in Michigan, the 98% rate that has been lost, 98% of the native population has been lost because of murders and colonialism through these 500 plus years. That is evolution. Apparently, that's a good thing, and that's what the kids are learning. So that's what we're fighting against. We're trying to eradicate all of it, and certainly as much as we can. And the more support we get on this, the farther we can take this. If you want to be a part of this, you can direct message me at Nolan Hack on Twitter, NOLANHACK, or email me at nolanawhack@gmail. That's NOLANAWHACK. We already have a sect of AIM involved, and we have a group at Yukon, along with people all over the country, getting on top of this. So if you'd like to join, hit me up.
Cool. Well, I'll tell you, I'll go next. I just did 2 My Non-Objective Opinions last week. One was with Jay Beware, and the other was with Badger Femme. And the one with Jay Beware was about the prison industrial complex and the abolition in general, and then abolition of prisons. And the one with Badger Femme was about the same issues, but more personal and from a woman's perspective. So I think those are 2 really good shows. I hope people check them out. They're really, really informative. And we have the upcoming Who's Culture with Nolan and Gail coming up soon. That's going to be a good show. It should start next week or the week after. And that's all about pop culture and television and movies and music and whatever. So check that out too. That's about it for us at People's Radio. What's going on with Glenn?
Well, season 7 of The View Up Here will premiere in early October. I've decided to just not push it and wait that long. You know, usually new season's in September, but this will be October, so tough shit. That's about it on that side. I'd just like to say about what Nolan was speaking to. There's a lot of familiarity with that timeline in Canada with the residential schools. I'd just like to throw in that I believe yesterday, or maybe it was Wednesday, was the 10th anniversary of the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples, UNDRIP. That's still a very big issue in Canada, as is the so-called Truth and Reconciliation Committee recommendations. For a summer where government is not doing business in Canada, the issue of Indigenous matters have been pretty in the news, more than usual. So that's good to see. This sounds like a pretty cool project that Nolan and Gal and others are doing, and I look forward to seeing what that brings. As far as what I'm going to be doing in the new season on The View Up Here, I think one of the first issues will be the state of Canadian quote-unquote national security. There is finally some new bills that are supposed to change C-51, the Anti-Terrorism Act in Canada. I ain't too impressed with what's come forward. Surprisingly enough, hardly anybody's really impressed, except, of course, those in government and those in the national security apparatus. They seem to think these are great bills. So, I mean, there's a red flag if you ever seen one. But, you know, otherwise, I'm trying to enjoy my time away from a weekly show. This is my return after, I don't know, close to a month maybe. But I'm always happy to be on People's Radio Weekly.
Damn right you are. Miko, anything you want to talk about coming up or that you're working on?
We're pretty scattered all over the place as usual. Working on, I'm in Austin currently, just got back from Florida, where we were in Irma. Before that, we were in Houston, trying to help out some of the relief groups that are down there for Harvey, and we do plan on heading back down there to basically bring some attention to some of those relief groups and what they need, because there's guys that have been down there for weeks now and aren't getting a break, so they definitely need help down in Harvey. Luckily, with Irma calmed down enough to where Florida isn't really super fucked like Texas and Louisiana is. Their problems more circulate around like electricity being out for a lot of people and things of that nature that are just frankly above our pay grade. And then I don't know now with Jason Stockley, I imagine I'll probably have to go out to St. Louis before I get a chance to go back to Houston. So, I don't know, we're very scattered as this empire continues its descent into basically falling.
Yeah, we were talking about that before the show. What's going to be the incident that sets it all off?
Well, and I would like to get out to the fires, too. I feel like the fires are really being, I mean, it just sucks the timing that happened, because those fires went off, and those fires are bad. But then, Harvey hit, and they kind of got pushed into the shadows, and then you got Irma, and now you got Jason Stockley, and there's some pretty serious fires going on, and I just feel like they're not really getting the attention they should be getting. But I don't know, it's hard to give everything attention right now with so many things going on. Then also North Korea early this morning, over in Japan time, Friday morning, shot off another missile over Japan after vowing that they'll sink their country or sink their islands. And then 6 minutes after, South Korea actually returned, they fired 2 missiles, one of which failed in its initial state. So aside from even the shit that's going on here, we also have the international situations definitely hitting a very odd boiling point.
Yeah.
I would like to add, though, talking about the natural disasters, the earthquake in Mexico killed more people than the hurricane in Houston, and one got talked about and one didn't, even though Mexicans actually came over the border and helped with relief efforts for Harvey. Free, pro bono, just like Miko has been doing, just helping her fellow person. But because Mexico's obviously not a white country, that they don't matter. Just like Sierra Leone with the mudslides, hundreds of children dead, mass graves, situation in and around India, over 10 million people in trouble. You've already had a bunch of deaths happen there, but it's not a white country. If Mexico was England and India was Luxembourg, then we'd be talking about that a lot. It's the same thing when there's a terrorist attack or a tragedy, when it happens, in Brussels, Manchester, Western society is all over it. But if something happens with Boko Haram, thankfully a bunch of the young girls are released and now are now safe. That didn't really get much press in the American media, I think it's India and Pakistan are having these problems. The babies that are in hospitals there are dying because of lack of power and negligence. These are babies, these are human babies, but that's not getting any coverage over here. But we always manage to give coverage to Trump playing golf or Trump, yelling at Democrats, or even PBS giving Ben Shapiro time to speak, giving CBS giving Steve Bannon time, a whole interview. So we always, this country always finds a way to publicize what it wants and erase what it doesn't want in the public.
Yeah.
Do we have new arrivals?
Yeah, I think Gal and Gear are in here now, and Top is on his way in a second.
Hey guys, Gear.
Hey Gear.
Woohoo! How's it going?
We're good. Gear's on her way to work, so that's why she sounds a little bit distant.
I've been told that it comes across on the radio all right, so Cool.
In that case, Gear's sitting here with the rest of us in this magnificent studio.
I'm about to go through a mic maintenance moment, aka a dead zone. So hang on, I'll be right back.
Okay. And Top's getting added. And Gal, are you in here? I guess Gal's not in here.
Yeah, I'm here. I
Oh.
just couldn't get it unmuted.
Oh.
I've been here the whole time.
Oh, okay.
I felt like a lurker. That's what I do.
Top, are you in here now?
I believe so. Testing
Oh,
1
there's
and
a
2.
verdict.
Yeah, this
Gang.
I
verdict.
wanted to add to Nolan the genocide in Myanmar is something that's not getting any press. Do you even
Lots
know
of
about the genocide in Myanmar?
It's true. You're absolutely right.
Well, I think what now is starting to get coverage, but is about 2 years too late, is the West is actually pressuring Aung San Suu Kyi to do something.
Always too late.
She's dismissed it as fake news, no less.
Yeah, that sounds part of the course, doesn't it? You know, but then there was no real coverage about how she got released from house arrest, even though the government never changed. And that was one of Obama's tricks. Rather interesting that maybe 6 weeks after she was released from house arrest and was allowed to enter politics, the first McDonald's opened in Myanmar. No connection at all.
Mm-hmm. Now that makes sense.
And Coca-Cola appeared.
Goodness gracious.
Well, just within the last month, 500,000 Muslims, I can't pronounce the actual ethnic group, it starts with an R, have
Rohingya.
been forced away from their home, and 100 babies washed up on the shore of Bangladesh last night.
Yeah,
So
I heard
Rohingya.
about that. 500,000, that's 500,000 people displaced.
It is one of many ongoing genocides in this world that just doesn't get described correctly.
Well, I'm sorry, if it was France, if those babies washed up on somewhere in France, the press would be all over it. It's color. I mean, it's that simple. It's sad. That's the way it is, but
We're getting coverage here in the UK. We get to know all about it. Not necessarily on the main news broadcasts, but there are certain news publications online that are reporting the Rohingya situation and the Nobel Peace Prize winner and her commentary on this with the fake news, etc. It is being reported. It may not be top in the news in the United States, but it is elsewhere.
It is also in the U.S. Yesterday was the first time I saw it in the U.S.
Oh, there you go.
thank goodness we got one little blip there. That reminds me when CNN did a little special on a Sunday night months ago about, they didn't call it genocide, but they about the problems that Native people face in the United States. And they had rock star herself, Tara Hauschka, on, along with a number of other Native activists. And that was it. It was like a one-off little thing. But we continue to have to hear Huckabee Sanders on the microphone denying the obvious that Trump's a white supremacist. We have the distraction of a black woman on the sports channel admitting that obvious reality that Trump is a white supremacist, but then we're going after her for stating the obvious because she's a black woman and Trump is a white supremacist, and we don't want to admit that. But deflection and delusion are two great tools of America, the United States.
Absolutely. Colin Kaepernick.
Oh, yeah. I was watching, and I'm probably the only one on this broadcast who watched the game last night in the National Football League. But one player who played in that game is a running back for Cincinnati by the name of Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon, while he was going to the University of Oklahoma, violently knocked out a woman. And it's all on tape. And it's disgusting to see. And he clocked her. It's just so violent and disgusting. But he's in the NFL. He got drafted. Talent-wise, he's amazing. He may become a superstar and have the opportunity. He has the opportunity to do that. Colin Kaepernick is never going to play football again, simply because he's an angry black man fighting against the racism of the United States. And that is very prevalent in the National Football League. You have that team in Washington, you have the Kansas City Chiefs, and he's blackballed just for that. And the stories that are written about him are so often saying how he needs to be quiet and shut up and, distraction, delusion.
Well, it certainly it won't be the first time, and unfortunately it won't be the last, but as a Canadian, I invite Mr. Kaepernick to come ply his trade in the CFL. I know it'll be a huge pay cut, but hey, we're more than happy to have Colin Kaepernick be a quarterback in the Canadian Football League.
That would be something else. You had another black quarterback who they wouldn't let play quarterback.
Michael Sam, right?
He went there. He was the defensive player, but Warren Moon is a Hall of Fame quarterback. They would not let him play simply because he was black, and he dominated the Canadian League, and then came to the NFL later in his football career and dominated the NFL. But
absolutely, Warren Moon played for the Edmonton Eskimos, which is where I live. I watched Warren Moon run this team for years. He is one of the greatest quarterbacks we've ever seen up here. Just think if he would have been playing those 20 years of his career all in the NFL, he would probably own just about every record there is. Dan Marino, Dan who?
Exactly.
Yep.
He's great in college, too, at Washington.
Yes, he was. Won the Rose Bowl.
Yeah. Which was the problem. You can't have a black quarterback win the Rose Bowl. Especially at that time. I mean, we weren't allowed to play quarterback really until the 90s, the 80s, late 80s. Randall Cunningham, it's about that. So that shows you how unremoved America is from racism. And then we have this thing with Stockley. He kills a black man because he's a black man, and he gets off. They all get off. Yeah. And if they don't get off, like a Kai Gurley's killer, it's house arrest and community service. I think that's one thing that the American public and Western powers need to understand if they're really going to ally with people of color. People of color, especially black and indigenous people in North America, are still considered less than white people. We're still subhuman in this society. Until white folks get that, we're going to have to leave all those different white folks behind, because they're going with that kumbaya and let's just come together as a people. But the problem is your people, white delegation, white America, whatever, is beating us down every day simply because we're black. I mean, we've had a number of, it's every year, it's every month, but we've had a number of black kids killed by the cops within the last month and a half. One as young as, I think it was 14, 15. Aries Clark, Kamonte Cobbs, Darren Neal, and Xavier McMillan. And with McMillan, he had handcuffs on in the back of the squad car, and they said he killed himself somehow in the back of the squad car with a gun. And you'd think that if you're arresting somebody, you take their weapons away. You think. And even if the gun was there, like, he somehow got it to fire and kill himself with his hand behind his back. So. Just American society. It's just the way it is.
Well, America's not alone. I mean, on my recent holiday, I went to our nation's capital, Ottawa, where the killing of an unarmed black youth by Ottawa police is not going away. Charges, they have gotten approval to actually charge the officer, so now we'll see what happens. Of course, it's moving at a snail's pace, but it's not being completely discarded. Then I was in Toronto, and I went to the intersection where Sami Yatim was killed on a streetcar by Toronto police. That issue is still very much alive in the city of Toronto, but nowhere else. So the same things happen every day in Canada, but I think we're just a little further down the road towards admitting as a society that this shit should not be happening. Of course, there's no real change yet, but it does seem to be a bigger problem in Canadian society than American society, unfortunately.
Yeah, in reality, it's a bigger problem here, though, which is crazy.
No. Well, I mean, publicly, you know.
Yeah, I know. That's what's odd about it. You'd think it'd be the other way around.
Indeed.
Does anyone have any news on what's happening in St. Louis right now?
We could check.
I know there was.
I do. If you give me 5 minutes to get the computer on, because I just pulled up, I will fill you all in.
Okay, we'll find out what's going there in 5 minutes.
We've just been moderating
on the ground.
Yeah, Revolutionary Z and Miss Jupiter.
Yeah,
go
ahead.
I'll post the link to Red's stream because I'm modding it at the moment. He's offline currently. His phone's overheating. But yeah, they've already started pulling riot lines with the police across the street, aggravating angry people already because of the Stockley verdict. The police are out there in force, helmets, batons,
National Guard,
snatch squads, inside streets. It's all there. It's a tinder box waiting to go off.
Caused by the
police. They're there antagonising, effectively.
Well, I mean, it wouldn't even be happening if they hadn't murdered somebody and let the cop go. They let a murderer walk the streets after killing somebody, and all the evidence points to his guilt. He even said, "I'm going to kill the motherfucker" before he killed him.
On body cam, yes. How stupid can you get? Or no, I'll rephrase that. How fucking blatant can you get?
Yes.
That's premeditated.
Yes, it is.
Yep. I'm curious.
The judge said that they said not guilty because in all their years as a judge they never seen a heroin dealer without a gun or something to that effect.
Ridiculous. I'm curious if Missouri has capital punishment for capital murder, because premeditated murder.
Gal will answer that.
Yeah.
I just don't know how they always get a not guilty verdict, no matter what happens, no matter how much evidence, no matter how many videos, no matter how much everything's proven, is not even shocking anymore. It's like it's not going to be. As soon as they started putting up the barricades, 2 weeks ago we were doing a show thinking the verdict was coming that day. And then they call in the National Guard. Everything they do lets you further know it's going to be another not guilty verdict.
Well, and one thing with the verdict waiting to come out is that the judge's daughter got married last weekend. There's also been some events in the area. And so that was one of the reasons why we had such the delay on actually getting to hear the Stockley verdict.
So the judge's daughter could have a nice wedding?
Basically, yeah. Yeah, basically they were making sure that all the shit was set up so they can't destroy the city and make sure that the judge's wedding went hunky-dory.
How important is this woman's wedding to the state of Missouri? And why does her wedding take precedent over social justice?
Because
evidently, her wedding is way more important than the life of a black man.
That's it. It's that simplistic.
Yeah.
It's that simplistic. We are not considered to be...
You guys know it's her special day, y'all.
It
only happens 3 or 4 times in a lady's life.
There you go.
What's his name? Andrew Lamar Smith, or is that right?
Anthony
Lamar Smith. Sorry. Yeah, he doesn't get any more special days ever.
Yeah, he was 24 years old.
Exactly.
36-year-old Jason Stockley killed him.
Sorry, this is like the absolute tone deafness of America right there. Like, you've got your hero worship that goes into the not guilty verdict. You've got the, cops can never do any wrong bullshit line. And then you've got a white woman's wedding that is a judge's daughter. That is like, that's typical fucking America right there. It's sickening.
Out of a new sarcastic hashtag, black killer or blue killers matter.
It's true, they do. They really do.
Did you all see that disgusting Blue Lives Matter video?
I had to turn it off. I saw like the first 10, 20 seconds of it, and I was I'm going to throw my computer across the room or something. Well, it's like...
I'm sorry. It's called blue racism.
Yeah.
It's disgusting. It's this video showing these poor police that are getting slaughtered in the streets because of racism. And they can't... And people hate people. They're afraid to tell their friends what they do for a living, and almost like they're born a police. They're born with that badge and gun. They're born a white supremacist murdering machine. They just can't help themselves.
Well, one problem that we really saw with the Stockley case is that you actually did have organizations such as Blue Lives Matter and the ethical committee and different law enforcement organizations that were actually calling for Stockley to be found guilty, which normally we don't really see that. Granted, there was some police apologists that 100% stuck on his side, but I did think it was very interesting that there was also a lot of police organizations that saw the dangers of not convicting Stockley and were trying to push for that. So to a certain degree, I almost had a little bit of faith that just maybe we would see a guilty verdict come down, but
police unions are too powerful.
Well, and that's why it didn't go to jury trial either. A lot of people don't realize that. This was not a jury trial. This was a judge trial. There was one judge that looked over this case, and that was it. So this was
ridiculous.
not Stockley being judged by a jury of his own peers. This was nothing like that. This was literally one person just deciding if they were going to say guilty or not. And even funnier, it was actually requested by Stockley that it be a judge hearing instead of a jury.
Of course.
You don't want to have
Citizens.
especially in a large black population. You don't have any of those people on the jury. And most of the time we get barred from those trials anyways when they do have a jury trial. So it's not a
Police.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say police, unlike the citizens, actually do get a jury of their peers. If they ever get a jury, it's going to be a sympathetic jury to them. If it was the other way around and somebody shot a cop, and let's say he was black, he wouldn't have a jury full of black people. He might have a majority white jury that doesn't even represent the area he lives in. So it's definitely not a jury of his peers.
No.
But these police, they get
This is
grand juries.
definitely-
Yeah.
The judicial system was already gasping for air in regards to not just police shootings, but our government entities and even corporate entities, for that matter, being held responsible or held accountable for their actions. And this Stockley verdict, I believe, I mean, me, myself, I'm disgusted. I think that a judicial system that was already gasping for air just had its throat stomped on by the city of St. Louis. This just shows that they can do whatever the fuck they want. I mean, there's not questions with this one. This isn't a Darren Wilson, Mike Brown situation where there's arguments, there's sides that aren't adding up. I don't know how much more evidence you could have against Stockley to show that he went to kill that man. I guarantee that revolver came from Stockley's home. I just don't know how much more.
The
how
only
much more it
DNA,
could get.
the only DNA evidence on that revolver was from the cop, right?
Yes, it was from Stockley, and it was on a screw. And then one of the things that's very important about that is that Stockley actually had no injuries on him. Now, granted, there are chances that that DNA could get on from, a number of different ways. I believe, though, that the forensic analysis of it, I believe the person actually noticed a smudge of something on one of the screws, and that's why they checked it. And so the best idea of how that DNA got on that gun was that it got on there on a completely separate day before December 20th, 2011, when him and Anthony had this confrontation.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, too, is the bag of heroin that Stockley found, because Stockley is the one that found the heroin and the revolver together. And one of the arguments that the judge used in the verdict was that in all the years of being a judge, it's very rare for a heroin dealer to not also have a gun on them. So the heroin bag, though, that was found in the car also only had Stockley's DNA on it.
Yeah, either way, why is he the one going in the car after he just killed somebody?
Not only did he go in the car, he removed his gloves. He went to the back of the cruiser 4 different times. The first time to put his AK-47, his personal AK-47, in the back seat. And then there is the dash cam footage, obviously, from inside the police car, where you can see him digging into a duffel bag, and he has his back blocking the cameras to where you cannot see what he's getting out of that duffel bag. What he claimed was he was pulling quick clot out of there. And even though you can see him fidget with his waistband, he claims that he put the quick clot in his top pocket to go help Smith. But he never did that, and he claimed it was because of the clavicle shot, which the clavicle wound that he administered onto Smith was actually determined to be within contact to 6 inches away. So his police issue Beretta was basically on Smith's body when he gave that clavicle shot, and he claimed that he didn't end up using the quick clot because he noticed how bad the wound was, and he thought moving him or trying to do the quick clot would make things worse.
The real crime is that they're allowed to fabricate a timeline like this. I mean, you know, if you want to speculate, you know, it's pretty obvious what happened. He went in a duffel bag. He got the clean weapon to plant, put it in his waistband. I mean,
and I imagine what I actually think is he got that clean gun and he got the bag of heroin.
Yeah, very well could be.
This is St. Louis we're talking about. They're very known for planting evidence, planting weapons. I mean, this is not the first time that St. Louis Metro has had problems like this of planting any kind of evidence on one of their suspects. That's unfortunately way more common than people would like to believe.
There you go. So, I mean, what's the lesson here? If you just simply premeditate blocking cameras from seeing what you're doing, which everybody knows, but nobody can say because of the Constitution, and because we all know that that's what you did, and now, you know, we don't have this beyond a reasonable doubt fallacy, he walks.
Well, there are a few reasons that he walks as well. They went for first-degree murder instead of second. I don't know what you guys talked about, though. I just got back. I don't know if you discussed that.
Okay, the question I have is now is if he was to be charged with second-degree murder in the future, is that double jeopardy?
He can't be charged again.
What bullshit.
So if the prosecutors should have went, that's the reason they do this. This is very, very common in the U.S. criminal justice system when going against cops. For one, they want to go for a bench trial because they know that no judge is going to convict them. That's why they won't go. And even if they do end up with a jury trial, what they'll do with the juries, and I know this for a fact, is whenever they're choosing the jury, they'll ask specific questions like, do you believe everything that police officers say? And if you say no, you're not allowed to be on that jury. And then on top of that, so then they make sure that they stack the jury. That's the whole point, which is why we don't get convictions. That's another reason. And then what the prosecutors will do, because the prosecutors often have to work with these police officers and these police departments on a regular basis, so the prosecutors will overcharge knowing that there's no way, because first-degree murder is premeditated, meaning he had to have planned it out. Whether or not that is part of this or not, it should have been second degree, and there would have been a higher likelihood of him actually being convicted. But any time that it goes with first degree would mean that there has to be some pre-planned intent, and that's usually what's not there, even if it's in the the heart of the moment when it happens, or the crime of passion, as the terms they like to use. With it being first degree, there's no way it'll ever be under conviction under those sins. That's how it works. That's the way it's always worked here in the U.S.
So the actual
problem is that they actually did, to a degree, had a good argument for first-degree murder, because not only do you have the dash cam where he said, we're going to kill this motherfucker, don't you know? He also, and that's where it gets a little iffy, and I do agree with you, second degree would have had a better shot. But if he was, in fact, carrying a clean gun with him and heroin to put on a perp that he shot, it does show that those two together could classify as the first-degree murder, in that he did plan on doing this at some point, but where it definitely gets a bit sketchy is the fact that it wasn't Anthony Smith in specific that he was planning on murdering. This more looked like he was just covering his ass at all times.
Yep, I fully agree with you. We know that, and as you already covered, being in St. Louis, I can tell you we know that this is a regular where they carry the guns with them, they carry the drugs with them. I have family members who are on that police force and who have been on that police force who will openly state the shit that they've done and the shit that they do.
Okay, I have a question. If the charges would have been murder 2 and conspiracy to commit murder 1, Why couldn't that have been proven? But I guess that's too
it's not even
politically
saying that it wouldn't be.
inconvenient.
No, that's a common. We see that all the time with different cases. This case has been around for so long that even the second that they said they were going for first degree, and I agree that there is plenty of proof there, and I'm not sure who I was speaking to this then. I know Glenn. Who was the other gentleman I was speaking to? Is it Mika?
Miko. But yeah.
Miko. Okay. I don't. Sorry. Hello, I'm Gal.
Hi, Cal.
Nice to meet you.
I don't think you're on. I was on here for the first time like 2 weeks ago, and then
Right.
last week because I was in Irma.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying. That I think that there was a good argument there, and that's what they're going to hold it on with reading the verdict, was that they didn't specifically plan it on this person. Even though they had a plan to do this, it wasn't on Anthony Lamar Smith. And so that's where they lose that first degree. But if they would have done second degree, as we've seen, you'll see sometimes where they'll go, so if this was just a regular, I hate saying that term, person who was not an officer, usually what you will see is all the charges will be there, first, second, and third, and then they'll allow either the judge or the jury to choose one of them, but they don't do that with officers because officers are above the law and they don't want them to be convicted.
Yeah, that makes sense to me because that's kind of the way it works with our British system. I mean, you're charged with murder. And, a murder was committed. And then it's either up to whoever the deciding factor is, whether it's a bench trial or a jury trial. They decide what degree the crime is.
Right. And we saw the same thing this week with the DOJ dropping any charges against the 6 cops involved in Freddie Gray's murder as well. And one of the things with the prosecutor, when they originally announced charges, the first thing that everybody was saying is that those charges are too high. Like, we know that's why it's done in that sense, is if you overcharge, you know that person will not be convicted because of that overcharge. Then you have to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt that they sat down and planned to kill this specific individual, not just anybody, and then that's how they'll be able to get off with that, even if you can prove murder too. If they don't charge them with murder too, then that's not even on the table. In a regular murder case, that is on the table, but when it is officers, it is not.
Ridiculous.
You had in Detroit, a man named Joseph Weeky, back in 2010. He murdered a 7-year-old girl named Ayanna Jones. 7 years old, black girl. And they were, the cops were a part of an A&E reality show. So coming in with guns blazing is obviously something that looks sexy to the camera. The cops were told that there were children in the house. Do not shoot. Figure something else out. Don't. And they ended up, of course, killing her. He's gotten off twice on different charges. He's on active duty. I was allowed back on active duty. And his brother's also a police officer, and he was suspended last July, after he said, for the first time in my nearly 17 years as a law enforcement officer, I contemplated calling into work in response to the outrageous act perpetrated against my brothers. It seems like the only response that will demonstrate our importance to society as a whole. The only racists here are the piece of blank expletive, Black Lives Matter terrorists and their supporters. So you have one cop who already killed a black child, and then you have another cop who's defending that type of behavior. But of course, that's the whole issue, that this type of behavior is not only legal, it's encouraged. And I think that's kind of lost when we talk about when a cop gets off or when a cop kills us. They're trained to harm. American police officers are trained to harm or kill people of color, especially black and indigenous people. Indigenous people have even a higher rate of getting killed by the cops than black people do, which is terrifying because cops love to kill black people. And it's normal, it is encouraged, and I'm at the point now where I wonder, other than civil cases, I don't see the point in trying to convict these officers. Because they're going to get off 99% of the time, and if they don't, it's like Gurley's killer. We just have community service and house arrest. And Miko was speaking about Michael Brown and the ifs of that case, and especially when it came out, there were ifs. But at the end of the day, the family still got millions of dollars. So obviously there was a fault there by police officers. But yeah, go ahead, Cal.
I was just going to say, but remember, so we can sit here all day and talk about how fucked the system, and I do that regularly anyway. But we have to remember when those millions are paid out, that's taxpayer dollars. Those officers aren't being held accountable at all. If we even change the system a little to make it to where they had to have insurance and it had to come out that way or out of their own pocket, we would see this stop in a heartbeat. But since they're never going to jail, 99% of the time, I can name 4 officers since 1995, and I've been doing this a long time, long before Ferguson, that have actually gone to jail. And it's very, very rare for it to occur. But even if we realize that kind of accountability isn't going to happen, because it's just not, and it's not going to happen, even worse now under this pro-law and order DOJ that we have that has said that he will not uphold any of the consent decrees, Jeff Sessions' words himself, then there should be another way to at least go about, even if it is along the lines of making sure that officers must have insurance or must pay these settlements out of their pockets.
Very good point.
Yeah, that would make sense, but, you know.
And one problem that a lot of people don't realize, especially St. Louis is the wrong place for this to happen. When people, obviously Ferguson exploded, a lot of people thought that was because of the Mike Brown shooting. And still to this day, a lot of people do not understand that Mike Brown played a very small role in what happened in Ferguson. Mike Brown just became the straw that broke the camel's back, because this is not something that was a new problem. It's not like randomly Mike Brown got shot and, the people were up in arms. This is something that Missouri, which we all know to be a very racist area. I mean, the Mason-Dixie line even goes around that motherfucker for a reason. So with the Mike Brown shooting, like I said, it was just the final straw. The African-American community in St. Louis knows to be afraid in that area. They know to stay away from Ferguson and Camden and all these side areas because they can get shot there, not just arrested, not wrongfully profiled, but literally shot and swept under the rug. I remember being in Ferguson for just days when the next police shooting happened. I think it was a half-mile away. But Ferguson was also never meant to be for the African-American community. What happened is they got pushed into that area that was once a white area, and the people were not happy about that, the white people, by that. So that's one of the big problems. And the other thing that we did see with Mike Brown and Darren Wilson is that aside from Darren Wilson being guilty or anything like that, I'm not even going to take a side on that one. I have my personal views, but that's all they are. The fact of the matter is that the judicial system failed the people of Ferguson because of all of the different stories, the contradicting views of what happened. The grand jury should have sent it to trial. And that's not saying, again, that's not saying Darren Wilson was guilty, but the people were failed because it should have went to trial. That's how a grand jury works. It's not supposed to be dragged out for months. It's supposed to be a very quick process where if there are questions remaining, it goes to trial. That is all the grand jury does. It's not about Darren Wilson's guilt.
Oh, I'll jump on that and tell you my own personal opinion and my professional opinion after reading the grand jury statement, the entire thing. Yeah, Darren Wilson was guilty, but that's just my opinion, of course.
See, and I'm right there with you on that.
And I mean, you're talking about my home, and so I'm going to have it hits close to home. Another thing, though, that you bring up with St. Louis, so many people don't realize how segregated St. Louis is, including the people that live here. My students don't ever understand until I show them the actual lines. Of course, the lines are invisible, but especially African Americans know where to go and where not to go. You have sundown towns still, even though they won't use those terms, where they know that they can get shot, and as you said, it'll get swept underneath the rug, whether it is an officer or not. We've seen 7 activists killed in the last 3 years that have just randomly ended up shot and ended up in their car on fire, which never get investigated. One being King Seals, yes. And that's just one. We had one on the night of the grand jury announcement that got overlooked because of obviously all the other news that was going on. But we have 161 municipalities in St. Louis alone. And that's one of the one big issue when you start looking at the reason why there are so many municipalities is because of basic gerrymandering, right? It's in order to draw those district lines, in order to draw those city lines to make sure that whoever is going to vote here, there, and wherever. And as you said, with Ferguson, wasn't originally a African-American town. That was more along the line of Jennings, which is right on the border. And it's to the point where if you're in St. Louis, I've lived here my entire life, and I can tell you that I didn't even know where Ferguson was. It was just North St. Louis. Like, that's how we refer to all the municipalities. We don't know. I can't name all 161 of them. I can tell you where North St. Louis is, North County is, South County, South St. Louis, West, and so on. And you've got all these, what we call it as the locals, and we know what we're talking about. But when you start getting into the actual names, some of them are so small, they're 500 people, 1,000 people, just so that they have their own little borders. And it's pretty well known. I mean, we've got This American Life did a fantastic series on the segregation of schools in St. Louis about 3 years ago, just looking at the racial issues along those lines and people being forced to go to different schools because of the color of their skin. So you're absolutely right that it wasn't, Michael Brown was the catalyst, was the straw that broke the camel's back. But this has been ongoing for decades. And with this case being in St. Louis proper, it is my fear that this is going to explode larger than Ferguson ever even had a chance to.
Oh, it's 100% going to. I still feel like they're going to burn that city to the ground, and I feel like they have every fucking right to.
Completely agree.
One other thing that really, because all of these things make St. Louis such a volatile area, is also Bob McCulloch, the St. Louis County prosecutor. A lot of people don't know, when he was a young child, his father was a police officer, and while on duty and arriving at the scene of a robbery, he was shot and killed by a black criminal. And he was shot in the head, killed on duty. Now, the other thing that goes into play with this is that this happened long enough ago to where the word nigger in Missouri and St. Louis was not even, it's still not controversial, and back then it was even less. So you have a child who has already, clearly granted it's from speculation, but given the area and everything, given his father's job, given how he acts now, clearly raised in a pro-racist area, pro-racist belief and upbringing, and then has that sort of tragedy happen at a young time in his age where he can't fully understand the difference between black, white, wrong, right. There's not that basic understanding. So all he knows, black criminals killed my father, who was a cop and trying to do the right thing, which that alone should keep him from even being able to be a prosecutor. If there was, there should be a better mental evaluation and everything, and then background checks that look into mentally scarring, mentally and emotionally scarring situations like that are going to play a role in the person's life for the rest of their life. There's another shooting where the officers showed up at the wrong house in St. Louis and killed the man there, and Bob McCulloch did not press charges. There was another one where they allegedly drove the car towards officers, and then after the federal investigation, it showed that the car never moved. And once again, Bob McCulloch did not press for anything. And so even with these other lesser prosecutors, Bob McCulloch still is that county prosecutor, and he's still got his power. He's got his swing. He's been there long enough to where if he wants somebody to be found innocent in that area, they're going to be found innocent.
Yep.
I even have a white woman named Jennifer Morgan. I'm one of the only ones that's been covering her story, and I finally got the medical records to show what happened. But she was a white woman who was married to a St. Louis County officer. She's a veteran, and she actually found an intruder in her mentally handicapped brother's house. She called St. Louis police, and they showed up and shot her in the back 18 times and paralyzed her. And then they were trying to press charges on her, claiming that she had a gun pointing at them. And just now, the only thing with her is they actually dropped the charges because it was after 2 years, and the judge was really getting irritated that the case was still going on. I flew out to St. Louis for her last court date, and magically enough, the cop that shot her happened to be on vacation for a clerical error. They didn't even realize the court date was then and accidentally wrote down his vacation time at the wrong time. And their star witness wasn't there, and that's when the judge finally had enough and dismissed the case and dropped all charges against Jennifer. But even there, you can see that, I mean, that was the St. Louis City, that was St. Louis Metro. But she even said, and her lawyer told me the same, that Bob McCulloch's presence was felt throughout those, through the prosecutors against her. So Bob McCulloch is a big part of why in St. Louis you'll never see a cop. I mean, and that with Jennifer Morgan being white, being married to an officer, being a veteran, and still not receiving justice, Bob McCulloch will never go against a police officer.
Nope. And on top of that, we have Jeff Rorta as well, who is the business manager and executive director of the St. Louis Police Officer Association, the FOP, who was a police officer until I think 2001 or 2002 when he got caught planting illegal information, changing things up, fraudulently changing charges, things like that on suspects, things along those lines. And then another thing a lot of people don't realize is that in the U.S., and I'm used to teaching, in St. Louis, we have two separate, I just lost my train of thought, unions for the police, where you have the FOP for the white officers and you have the ESOP for the black officers. The Ethical Society of Police is the black officers union. And that's still just like completely normal here in 2017 in St. Louis.
Can I just ask what FOP stands for the white officers?
The Fraternal Order of Police.
Oh, that's not fucking scary at all. That sounds hella for clown-like, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny you say that because that's another thing that was learned during the Mike Brown situation is Darren Wilson's very close ties with the Ku Klux Klan. And I even said this 2 weeks ago during Ferguson, Frank Ancona, who is no longer with us, thankfully.
Oh, damn.
Right?
Not Frank Ancona that met up with, what's his name, from Anonymous.
Yeah.
With Alex Poucher sat down with him.
Well, we told Alex not to, but he went ahead and did it anyway.
Yeah, and I heard Alex is down in St. Louis right now, too.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
But old Frankie boy told us back in Ferguson that we awoke a sleeping giant, and I always thought Frank was full of shit, just a terrible human being, and I still do to this day. But his words stuck with me, and again, I did say this 2 weeks ago, and I think I'm finally realizing why. I think for once in his miserable fucking life, Frank wasn't lying when he said that we awoke a sleeping giant. And I think what he meant by that was they took off the robes, they put down the torches, they picked up badges, they put on suits and ties, they got jobs as police chiefs and police officers, they got jobs in the Senate, because what's going to be more beneficial towards pushing a pro-white society than I mean, are you going to go out and just keep on lynching random black people behind buildings and in fields and shit, or are you going to get into a place of power and basically fuck over an entire African American community at one time? So that is one.
That's where I've been stating for quite a while now. That's exactly what we should be doing.
Exactly, it is. But we've also are very confused, as we start this rebellion against this. Many people think that just marching in the streets and breaking shit is going to be the answer, when in reality, we need to use the same strategy that they did and go in there, or we just need to scrap the thing. I mean, if we're going to go forward with the destruction choice, then we need to go all in. And if we're not going to do that, then we take these seats of power back.
I'm gonna disagree with you here, just on one point. That I think that 10,000 people turning up to a march of 200 Nazis, completely out-swamping them, and having them rethink their own strategy is actually quite beneficial.
Well,
waiting to see those benefits.
Here's the problem. Because, okay, you got this little rally shut down for that day, but who's still in power? Chris Kobach's still writing these laws for Trump. He's heading up all the Muslim-based shit. And I'm from Kansas originally, so trust me, I hate Chris Kobach more than many. He's a complete and total horrible person, and now he's running for governor of Kansas. But even though that rally got shut down, these police chiefs are still linked with these people. These people that in our Senate, our congressmen, are still in their same seats, and they're still pushing the same agendas and pushing these same laws and still flooding these prisons and still shooting people and getting away with it every fucking day. And all that really came from is we shut down one fucking rally that day.
Well, I will say that in those Antifa situations like Charlottesville, they can help shine a light on the problem, which I think that's what they did in Charlottesville, and I give them credit for that. But the problem you guys speak of is after the problem is shown, after the elephant is finally seen in the room, people don't know what to do, and then others only want to protect the country and themselves. And I will say I heard the N-word dropped a little while ago on the show, and I know it wasn't being used, throwing it at another black person, but I will say that anytime a non-black person uses that word, it stings. As a black person, I won't get on any other black person if they want to use it or not. That's their decision, but that's where it stops. No other race of people are allowed to use said word. Say, just like with the R word with Native people, granted that is really lax in the United States. That word's used every Sunday for 3 hours. But I just wanted to say that.
You know what? That's funny that you bring that up. This is here. I was having this conversation with my kids last night because my son-in-law is from Haiti, and we were talking about Trump in our town saying, "That's my African American." Mm-hmm. And I asked my son-in-law, like, "How does that make you feel, dude?" And he was just like, "It's so fucking stupid, you know?" And I'm like, besides being stupid, it's racist and it's fucked up. And we were talking about the word and how my daughter is Native and white, and I was telling her, you can't use that word. And she said, I know. I'm not allowed to use that word. It's not my word. And I'm glad to hear her say that because she has a way of kind of, adopting the ghetto kind of talk because she's hanging out with a lot of people from Oakland, so she's trying to fit in with these people and she's using their words, but she's not using the N-word. I'm really proud of her for that.
The word itself and the R word, the reason anybody listening or anybody on the show, if there's confusion to why even when it's used just to describe something, why it stings, is because the creation of both words were to reinforce the idea that Black and Native people are animals, animalistic, subhuman, don't deserve to be treated with the basic forms of respect and dignity. And our word, N-word, that was basically invented to knock us down peg after peg. Our word's similar in that context, but that word was invented when they started scalping Native people and then putting bounties literally on their head. And
so it's indicative of our murder. That's why it's incredibly offensive, because you're talking about white people going out gleefully murdering us and bringing home our scalps for money. That is what the R word means.
it's the truth. It's the God's honest truth. I think I wrote a thread. I think it was after last week's show, because I'd found out that Heather Hare was a Bernie Sanders supporter. No, I was really disappointed by that. And I bring this up because I think people, and mainly white people, they feel that if it's not overt racism, if it's not, defending out, with succinct verbiage of defending, our murders or systematic racism, etc., then it's not racism. If we're just saying a word, if we're describing something, or if we're making a joke or a comment. But even white folks and others who do a lot of the right things, they could still do something that is harmful. And I bring up Heather Hare because if you're supporting somebody, and if you tell other folks that this guy's good and he's righteous and will help people, when in actuality he's a horrible person. He's committed genocide against my own people, Black people in the United States, with the crime bill. He's signed off on war after war after war after war. He's signed off on blank checks to Israel to bomb the hell out of Palestinians. So that point, I wish, was like a public service announcement on American television every day, that it doesn't have to be right in your face with a swastika in terms of racism. And those are all forms of bigotry, transphobia, sexism, etc. It doesn't have to be right in your face, old school bigotry, for it to still be bigotry. And I like to also make the point that it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt us. And I think that's something that really gets lost when we.
I'm sorry to interrupt. In St. Louis, a police bus just pulled up, and they did start attacking that bus. Some of the protesters started throwing shit in now. They just opened those doors, and at least one cop came out swinging his baton, and now they're actually getting the full SWAT guys. They're running out there into the crowd.
Is there a feed up for that?
I think we're probably a couple moments away from seeing one of the first escalations from this.
Yeah, it's going to get pretty hairy, to say the least. Very.
Oh yeah, this is going to be a rough one, especially as we watch this transition over to the nighttime hours, and it's on a weekend.
Miko, is there a stream for what's going on? Or are you?
It definitely looks like we're seeing some of the common police agitation bullshit, and then attacking the crowd after getting them worked up.
Is there a live stream going on right now?
Yeah, that would be on Reb Z's stream.
Oh, okay.
Today we're mirroring all of John's streams today, and then I think I'm probably going to do some mirrors of Dirk, and then I got 2 other streamers down there that I'm waiting to go live right now.
Just think of all the overtime.
Well, it's interesting. It looks like they used a city bus.
Almost like they're rewarding them for killing somebody and getting off, right?
Exactly. They all have riot gear on. They all have extra protection, backup for backup. And they're the ones who killed one of us.
It says right here, in downtown St. Louis, the most rowdy riot cops have all removed their name tags to avoid accountability.
Oh, yeah, that was
normal.
something very common in Ferguson. Ferguson, you saw basically no name tags. And then even when we were in Baton Rouge for the Alton Sterling shooting, man, I'll tell you what, those Baton Rouge cops don't fuck around. Those guys are just straight up mean. And they don't give one shit. There was no name tags. There was no nothing. They even had on armor that I hadn't seen before in other areas. The one thing that's really interesting with the Baton Rouge, Alton Sterling, is that these cops were actually mocking protesters. And when they would get mad and yell back, they would run over and snatch up the person that started yelling back at them for their antagonizing. It was very odd in Baton Rouge.
They've done that before where they'll actually have like little mopeds or bikes and run into protesters, and then the protesters who fight back get assault on police, even though they weren't marked as police in any way. Just anything to sting the people into defending themselves and then turn that into whatever charges they could make out of it.
I do know days ago they were calling for 100 days of protest. Does anybody know, did that stand true?
I haven't heard anything about it.
Yeah.
The only protest I heard is going to be out there. It starts in November sometime.
Well, no, I meant in St. Louis over the Jason Stockley. I know groups were originally calling for 100 days and night of protest.
Oh, well, maybe it's starting today.
Yeah, I forget what group that is. I'll have to dig around and see if I can't find who made the call for 100 days and nights. But I definitely don't think this probably won't be a quick one, especially depending on how the police respond today and throughout the night and over the weekend.
I'm not seeing anything by the National Guard yet. Are they just staying back right now?
The National Guard is just ready to put boots on the ground the moment the governor...
Oh, they haven't deployed them yet. I thought they were.
No, there's 3,000 of them
no.
on. They're ready to go. There's 3,000 of them in St. Louis, just standing back.
I heard a report that a bunch of black National Guards said they refused to go because they were pissed off. I don't know if that's true or not. Has anyone else heard anything about that?
I haven't heard it.
That's interesting. You wonder if they quit after this.
I imagine, I don't know. I'm trying to, I got some new writers and shit that I need to get trained and some other things that I need to do in the background. I almost got on a plane at 6 in the morning today to get out to St. Louis, but I do have some other things I need to do. I imagine I'll be out there pretty quick, though. Another thing is my body even still hurts from being out in Irma. Because I was actually out in the streets of Irma.
Yeah.
Which luckily Irma didn't do what she was supposed to do. By the way, that is another thing. A lot of people are kind of confused, and Facebook's been hyping that up a lot. We did go down south. Obviously, Key West got it pretty bad.
I saw you, Nico. I saw your here. I saw you, yeah. Thanks for that. I was really worried about all my friends in Florida, so that was cool. Thanks.
Yeah, no, it definitely turned out better than anybody. It looks like police just arrested somebody. They slammed somebody to the ground pretty hard.
Where are you finding a stream? Where are you finding a stream?
Revolutionary
He's
Z.
not live.
Yeah, no, he's live again right now.
I'm talking to him right now. He's not live.
I have a live stream coming through his YouTube right
I'm
now.
trying to figure that out because on Daily Hayes has him as live too, and I'm admin of his YouTube, and it's not live.
So
He's trying to
who
figure
is
out
this?
why people. I don't know. He's trying to. We're talking about it right now, trying to figure out where anybody's getting this. It's just interesting.
Huh.
I know. I'm finding it quite interesting. I've only been able to find one stream that's.
I'm sure they're cutting off a bunch. I'm sure.
Yeah, well, he said
Is
that
his
everybody's
phone
resting.
accidentally? Is his phone accidentally still on or something?
No, I'm on the phone with him.
Do you guys have anybody else going through
There
the
are streams
channel
out
at
there.
all?
There are streams, not through his channel though.
Maybe
I've got
through
his
his-
channel
yeah,
up
'cause
right
I-
here. His last live went off 25 minutes ago.
So is YouTube watching it before they play it?
This is what I'm wondering, or if they're replaying it, saying that it's live, because it's not. I have it.
He's still on the phone right now.
Yeah, I'm chatting with him.
Could you ask him when the bicycle cops in blue showed up? Was that towards the end of his stream, or was that towards the beginning?
I will ask. It's just interesting.
I was listening to commentary in the chat, and it was towards the end.
Okay.
Because
Yeah,
somebody
that's really odd,
asked,
'cause
somebody asked in the chat, what's going on?
Well, I know with his last one, because I told John that I'd mirror his streams all day. With his last one, it told us when he went offline, and I ended it shortly after. With this one, I'm still live. So,
Yeah, on his YouTube channel, the stream ended 79 minutes ago, and there's 54 people waiting for it to go back live.
I got 151 people watching on our Facebook page as it's live
Oh,
right
there
now.
you go.
Could you
I
add
did
is
want
really
to
peculiar.
mention. I did want to mention about the act of protesting, because with Charlottesville, I think most of us here recognise that it was a game changer per se. And what I mean by that is you had the major internet companies refusing to host Nazi and alt-right propaganda. And they had to find Daily Stormer, for example. They got chased off the web back onto the dark web. Now that severely hurts revenue. That's what keeps these guys going. Now I think the protests were a success to a certain extent just because of that very act alone.
I'm with you there. That's what I was saying before. It got more people to recognize the problem. It's just, I think what Miko and Gal were discussing, the fact that, what now? And the majority of folks in white America does not just change that much. They want the swastikas gone.
I think we have to do both. Sorry, I interrupted. Here again. I think we have to do both. I think we have to protest and we have to get people in the House and the Senate. I've got some friends who are, I know you don't like the Bernie bros and whatever, but some of them are running for Congress. And I think that's pretty freaking admirable, you know? Like, it pissed them off enough to get up and run for Congress.
True, but that is, it's something, but at the end of the day, those particular people have no chance to win the presidency.
I know.
And
But Donald Trump never had no chance to win the presidency.
but
Did he?
he represents America's core. He
Absolutely.
represents America's core, whether Americans want to admit that or not. Even Bernie himself, who is a racist, his pro-white middle class stance and lower class, that's anti-American. while Bernie is a capitalist, he still wants to help people on the bottom. That won't fly. And he's much more, using the left-right analogy, he's much more left-leaning than most people, and that's not allowed. I mean, JFK is the most liberal president the country's ever had, and they killed him. They wouldn't even let him get out of his first term. Bernie got the Dem nomination rigged and taken away from him. So they're, that they don't have a chance. It's the same thing if, like Monica Moorhead, had I voted, I would have voted for her. Lamont Lilly was her VP. Now they barely got any votes, but there's no way in hell that someone legitimate in terms of like, okay, we're all human. I think everybody's equal, and I'm going to take steps to make that happen. Those people are never allowed to become president or do much. That's why Martin Luther King was not a politician. Pelletier isn't a politician. Malcolm wasn't a politician. Stokely wasn't a politician. We got to rip the thing apart. We keep trying to vote this out or massage it or reform it. I mean, it's just going to keep happening. Like welfare reform. A lot of black people thought that was going to be a godsend for us. It turned into be a death trap.
We had a similar situation in the UK with Jeremy Corbyn. Now, I understand that the political system, the way it is at the moment, consider it an oil tanker. You can't do handbrake turns in an oil tanker, can you? So my reasoning and my how I persuaded myself to vote for Jeremy Corbyn, even though he was in charge of a party that voted for the Iraq War under Tony Blair, the war criminal, is that I voted for the guy that's attempting to make change because it's a step in the right direction. A step in the right direction is not a handbrake turn, bearing in mind the monolith that is our system that I refer to as an oil tanker. Now, I think Bernie Sanders was a step in the right direction himself of the American system that is the oil tanker. And I don't mean to be derogatory to nations around the world that America has invaded for oil. I'm just using an oil tanker as an analogy here. But you're not going to radical change. I got asked a question when I was in Croatia by friends from Occupy there called Occupy Zagreb. And do we want, or do they go for revolution or evolution? Now, to me, that's quite an important question. What is it that we all want? Is evolution as a lasting change or revolution that can be derailed and sidetracked and co-opted and leads to mass violence and death?
The question, Top, is do we have to have a revolution to have that evolution?
That's exactly why I asked. I'm just looking at it from the way things are at the moment. Donald Trump, I think, is a revolution of the wrong kind, but it's still a revolution of sorts.
Evolution is a long, slow changing process. I think people want something much quicker.
But nothing will change that fast, and that's what people have to realize. Humans want that fast change, but nothing can change that fast. A system won't change that fast with a revolution or not. All the revolution will do is until you get the majority of people with you, and at this point it's not even close, it's not even a quarter. Until you can get majority of the people with you, the only way to change is through the system itself. There's no other way.
My suggestion is steer that oil tanker into an iceberg. That's the only way we're going to get any change.
And I think Trump has steered into that iceberg. I reckon that's what's occurred with America's democracy, and the oil tanker that we use as a metaphor has occurred. Because Internationally, you guys, not you, Glenn, because you're Canadian, but our American friends here, the world has stood up and took notice of the iceberg that is Trump for your oil tanker. Now, personally, I think Trump being in charge is going to invoke change a lot quicker than if Hillary was at play. Now, it would have been different if Bernie was at play. I totally get that. But internationally, and I think internally, Trump's got his own supporters asking for his impeachment now, if I recall news headlines from this week.
All two of them.
Oh, don't talk to the Democrats. That's the worst fucking sin you can ever have. Oh, and don't say that DACA is okay because, oh, Jesus, God, he is pissed off his freaking base. Oh, man, it's lovely. I'm having fun.
Well, that right there, though, the DACA, the new DACA deal they put out and agreed upon, that right there is why we can't keep upholding to the system. I mean, obviously we have to play within it to a degree and live in it because it is what it is. It's going to be here until it's gone, but it is here. But you have that DACA deal. The first one is like, okay, well, we have the Dreamer Act. That's great. And then Trump comes in, kills it. Oh, what? People going to be deported? Dems come in. It's like, no, okay, no, come on, this is awful. You have to keep this. You have to keep this. Fine. But more control and violence on the border. But there's always, if something good gets passed, there's always something bad with it. It's like the protecting, I don't know, I forget the exact name of it, but there was a section in the crime bill to protect women. But within that, Native women were not protected. They're actually put in even more harm. So there's always 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, 3 steps forward, 4 steps back with American politics. And you look in the 60s with Kennedy, or the Kennedys, black people were, well, now we're going to be okay. Now we're going to be okay. Keep voting for the Kennedys. Oh, well, one got killed. Okay, we'll vote for the next one. But even while these people were alive, they were complicit in our own demise. The 2 pillars of liberalism and American Democrats and doing things the right way, quote unquote, were 2 white racists and help quash and basically put in handicap the civil rights movement. And as I said on the last show, JFK was before the war started, he toured Germany. He was kind of in love with Nazi Germany, the way it looked. He said Hitler had the stuff of which legends are made. He's talking about how pure the Nordic races are in Germany.
Speaking of Nazi Germany, there's a shitload of cops in St. Louis, all in riot gear. Like a crap load.
Do we have a video? Does anybody have a live video? Nobody?
One thing we need to remember in all of this is politicians are a particular breed of people. You don't get normal people going into politics. Power is an aphrodisiac. Now, Hitler gives them a boner. There's a lot of politicians, they admire the doctrine that was the Third Reich and Nazi. Because it's control. Now, control is the key.
Yep.
You control the populace, you control the narrative, you control the media. You can get away with what the fuck you like. Hitler was an expert at it. So a lot of politicians, whether they're right or left leaning, but those that can seek power, seek control. And Hitler was a fucking massive advertisement on how to do it. We've got a situation in the UK A lot of our politicians come from a certain class of education, but there's a particular class within that education, and when I say class, I mean a particular education, I don't know what you call it, curriculum, and it's history and economics. History and economics. Each of our prime ministers, apart from Theresa May at the moment, but Tony Blair studied history and economics. David Cameron studied history and economics. It's a running theme on what these guys use to gain power. You know history, what worked previously. Economics, you know how to turn the screw to make people active for your political gain. It's like we're going through Brexit at the moment. You base your entire political argument on base fears of the populace. How do you know the base fears of your populace? You look at history. It's how to control a country 101. It's almost surgical in how it's executed today.
Well, I think we have to remember, especially when speaking about my own people, the political structures that are in place and now are in place in Africa are not ours and have been beating us to a pulp for 500 plus years. If you look at America when it was Turtle Island and run by Native people, there were literal checks and balances in place. And the women in most nations they ran the show. If a chief was effing up and the people he was in charge of, putting the city together, the women would get him out. And there'd be actual discussions, and there'd be Native people around a fire, and they're trying to agree on something politically. No one left the fire until they figured out what to do. It was America's for the people, by the people.
It's no coincidence that a lot of dictators, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, and we can include Kim Jong-un in this as well, they're quite proficient in English and have been English educated.
Right. We didn't speak English until English people came over to Africa. And we didn't talking about capitalism, that type of stuff. That was not us. I made a tweet yesterday. The original mindset of Black and Native people was take what you need. Of course, Western culture is take everything you want and then pick the carcass clean and take the remains. Of course, this is why we have climate change. So I know there's a lot. I mean, most people, I know I'm in the minority here, most people want to fix this American government and get the right people in the Senate, get the right people in the Oval. If you're a white person and you're a little selfish, sure, I would have. If I was that type of person, white and selfish, I would have begged Bernie Sanders to be president. I would, please God, let him be president, because it's like the New Deal back with FDR. The New Deal was for white people. After the New Deal happened, Black folks, indigenous people, are still poor as hell, still worse off than everybody else. Our depression, we're still going through depression. The depression for us never stopped. And then Bernie would have came in, the middle class, the lower class, doing much better, the economy's better. Just like Bill Clinton. But not for Black folk, not for Native folk, not for Latinos in the hood. And that's the thing, with speaking from my own people's standpoint, America, the American dream, the democracy of America it equals our demise, because we've had Democrats in the White House with Obama and Clinton for 16 years. I'm 29. So there's been Democrats in office more often than Republicans as I've been alive. And of all the presidents that have been in office, Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama, and Trump, Clinton's done the most damage to the black community than all of them. Any of them. Excuse me. Which is, to my point, why the only way we get out of this is if the system falls and we push it down. The only chance.
Then you can't worry about who's going to be president because Congress and Senate are corrupt. I mean, that's the way you have to look at it, because people keep saying, "Oh well, I'd vote for this person for president," or "These three people are no good for president." It doesn't matter. The whole system's corrupt. Then fuck the president all the way down.
I'm gonna throw in a spanner to the works, as you guys being a global leader, a superpower, etc. There was a report released this week. It was released on today. In fact, alarm bells that we cannot ignore. World hunger, that's global hunger, is rising for the first time this century. People are going hungry at a larger rate than ever in this century. We're supposed to be progressing.
We are progressing. Now, the rich people are selling food at higher prices that less people can afford, and they're getting richer. That's progression they care about.
Tim just made the point right there. Right there.
Well,
I've got another snippet to read out to you as well, because this is a situation here in the UK. This was a post called Mission Impossible. Now, in 1965, this guy was a fireman earning £1,000 a year and managed to buy a house for £3,500 with a mortgage 3 times his salary. Today, that same property is valued at £650,000. So if I wanted to buy it, I would need a £50,000 deposit and an income of £200,000 a year. This shows how utterly impossible our housing situation is in the UK. Now, this is financial vehicles at play. High house prices, the market of scarcity for property plays into the lenders and the builders who fabricate these houses out of the ground, which no one owns. Who owns the ground? Who owns the majority of this earth that we live on?
I do.
It's assigned to people. I know for a fact in America, you can. There's certain states where you can they advertise free ground here, build your house. That's not the same in the UK. A lot of the land is owned, and guess who owns the land?
The Crown.
Historic gentry or gentrified. Go and look at the majority of the land ownership in London. We've got a land ownership database, and it will just give you an idea. These guys don't even have to do anything. They just have to historically own something that was taken, and their family is going to be set for generations. So in one aspect of what you guys were saying earlier, that radical change does need to happen. It does. But how is it implemented? How do you wrench land? I know what we had Z-Gal, if you recall, was it last week or the week before, gave a breaking news flash on the show. I think Gear would know as well. The Native Americans were seizing back their land.
Yeah, that was about 3 weeks ago.
There you go. Gear, do you recall that? Have you lost Gear?
Gear? Uh-oh.
I think we've lost Gear. I wish that was more normal and consistent, natives getting their own land back, but alas, it's not. There's more taking of their land than them getting it back. Anyway, I'll make one point that Top was making. The wealth disparity between colored and white is ridiculous. 73% of white folks own a house. 47% of Latinos, 45% black. That's a huge, huge disparity. The median white household makes over $110,000.
That's not true.
Is that the median?
That's not the median. No, the median is $59,000 is the median.
I was wondering about that. I'm reading this from demos.org, but still the disparity. It's less than 10 grand for black or Latino people.
That's still not right.
How low
is 39? It's 39,000 for black families would be the median. It's 41,000 for Hispanic, and it's 34,000 for natives. These are the 6 stats that I use every day. That's the only reason I know them.
That's a lot higher for.
Yeah.
It's still the disparity, but it's a lot higher than I would have even thought.
Yeah, it is. But we've actually dropped. So if you go back to 1990, African Americans were making about 65 to 70% of what the average white family was making, and we've dropped from that to 2014. It was down to 50 to 55%. So there has been a decrease in that. But I can get you where you can get accurate numbers from if you would like. I don't know where you're getting your numbers from. I just know because I use them.
I'm never going to demos.org, even though they're allegedly reputable, but I don't like non-factual information. So yes, please do, Gal.
Absolutely.
But my point being that there's a huge wealth disparity, and always has been, in this country. So trying.
Oh, wait! I want to say that. Were you talking wealth or income? Because wealth, you're right on 10%.
Yeah, I was wealth.
I misunderstood you. I do apologize. Wealth, it is 10%. Income is not. Wealth is 10%.
Yeah. I'll reread it really, really quickly.
Sorry.
It's okay. We are all human here. In terms of the median, it was less than $100,000 for a white family. And that's much, much higher than families of color. And that's the issue here with trying to be equal when the gap between us and them they are equal, is that wide. So we don't have a chance to get to that point if we keep believing in the system that created and maintained that disparity in the first place. I mean, I lose my mind when people say, oh, it's 2017, it's 2017. How could this all happen? Well, we're still being redlined against. Black and Latino people are still barred from buying houses in the United States. This still happens today. So, and this is okayed by the system. Native children are being kidnapped and sold to white families. This happens today. The system sanctions this. The United States government sanctions this. Sex trafficking, underage sex trafficking. And Minnesota's about as bad as it gets. And then you go up to Canada that missing and murdered Indigenous women, where that is where the hotbed is for that. It's sanctioned, and that bring in Western society again. This is all okayed by the powers that be. That's we're talking about Bernie Sanders. Had Bernie won, okay, he would have won. He didn't win. He's talking all about how Black Lives Matter and how he's going to go after the police. He's still a senator. He didn't retire. You got to. I mean, I've used this example 100 times over the last couple of years. But there's a freaking microphone in the middle of Congress. You can say whatever you want. You could filibuster about your dog Larry for 15 hours straight. He can't get up there and say, "Hey, Black people, Native people, colored people are being murdered every day by civilians and the police force, law enforcement. This needs to stop." He can't do that. He doesn't want to do that. That's the point. And he is one of the most liberal, left-leaning, progressive, whatever word you want to use, members of Congress.
Someone just tweeted, "Fuck Bernie. What's up with St. Louis?"
Amen. Where is he? Where is he?
Oh, I'm the one that did that. Never mind.
Anyone
have any news? That's what I'm trying. I mean, yeah, but we know Bernie sucks. We've been through this.
News on what?
What's going on in St. Louis?
It's March right now. I'm watching it. I just tweeted out
because I'm seeing all these damn pictures of fucking nations of pigs in riot gear everywhere.
No, that was earlier. Not that they aren't still out there.
Are these old pictures then? Is that what's happening?
No, it's happening today. But right now the march is headed. I don't see any riot police right now. They're downtown. Next to where the Blues play. They're marching. I don't see any officers at the moment, but I'm sure they're here soon. Don't worry.
I've been tweeting this out.
I can't see anything. My Twitter's not opening, and I can't, as you know, we're recording.
I posted the link. Out. Yeah, I know. I just so you know that when we get off the call, you can look. I've tweeted out both of his links. I've also put it in this chat. So you'll have it. But right now it's just marching.
Yeah, I was worried. What?
This is the quote-unquote free speech zone. They tried to use that. The mayor 2 days ago said that they would be allowed to protest in free speech zones. Fuck your free speech zone. America is a free speech zone. Let it cruise in. Fuck off.
We talked about this before as well, but the free speech zone just violates your protest. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Right? I hate it. It's the same thing like when protesters like, ooh, we got a fucking permit. No, that's not a fucking protest. That's a rally. A protest is going against the norms, is going against trying inconvenience, raise awareness. You don't need a damn permit. And what the hell was the breaking news that just popped up on my screen? Oh. Judge just ruled that Jeff Sessions can't deny grant money for sanctuary cities. Just thought I'd throw out some breaking news there.
That's not bad.
Let's see. It's 4:00 in St. Louis right now. People are going to start getting off work. Well, it's Friday, so right about now. That would be pretty average here.
I just saw this. It says Illinois State Senate just passed a measure for neo-Nazi groups to be classified as terrorist organizations.
Yeah, they've been working on that. I think it was the House did it last week, so the Senate they did finally go through with it. Well, I'm sure,
have you seen on your streams, because I can't see, are there any counter-protesters out there, or everything's okay with that?
I haven't seen any counter-protesters, but I was at work until right when the show started. I had it up, but I didn't have any sound, because they wouldn't allow that.
I just see marching. Like you guys are saying, I don't see any violence.
That come around 6 or 7 o'clock, you're going to see some counter protesters. You're going to see the Blue Lives Matter groups, and as it gets dark, it's going to, it's going to it's getting larger every minute. I mean, it's just larger and larger and larger.
I saw a video of a priest that looked like standing with his back toward the police, arguing with the people earlier.
Well, there was an issue with the clergy, parts of the clergy, not all of the clergy, that actually had a meeting with the governor Eric Greitens earlier this week, promising that there would be no violence and telling them everything that had been done in the planning stages. So they, sold them out. But that isn't all of the clergy, because we have some fantastic, like Reverend Sukyu and some others that we have who are not like that. But yeah, a lot of the clergy sold them out earlier this week. So
how can some religious people speak for everybody?
Don't ask me.
It's the way. Well, we've been talking about the overall power structure. The Christian churches, for the most part, and definitely the Catholic Church, they're just a construction from white folks, and now are upholding colonialism. The Pope, the most liberal Pope of all time, as he's been labeled, he made Junipero Sierra a saint, even though he killed like 20, 30,000 native people and forced Christianity down their throats. So it's sad that religion and faith, which can be so beautiful, is, for the most part, in the society, so dirty and harmful.
It's all voodoo to me.
I can't blame you for that at all.
So it looks like Glenn had to go. Bye, Glenn, if you're still listening.
Have a good weekend, Glenn.
We lost gear.
So we're down to the three amigos for the last 5 to 10 minutes.
I think it's you, Miko, Top, me.
Is Miko still here?
And Gail. Actually, I don't see Gail. Is Gail still in here?
I'm here.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I'm here too, guys.
Miko,
I'm
you're
here.
still in here?
Oh, no, I'm talking to these guys. Hi, guys. It's Gear.
Oh, Gear's here.
Yeah, I'm just kind of at work,
Oh, okay. Is Miko still in?
I think Miko's left the building.
Aw.
So we got I'm looking at a masked white dude with sunglasses on. He's got a bandana over his face.
Yeah, sorry, I'm still here.
Oh, there you go.
I'm just trying to make sure that. Yeah, I'm just making sure that our streams are staying up and shit.
Have you seen anything going on differently than just the protests and marches right now?
And blogging
No,
the street.
That'll probably stay until nighttime. I got one person I'm trying to walk through. She's never streamed before, and she's streaming through YouTube, so I'm trying to get her up and going.
Yeah, I'm just worried because usually what happens in these situations is they start to get rid of the media and everyone with cameras, and they'll start trying to shut down streams, and then that's when the police will usually attack.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll probably see that in, I would say roughly 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
That's probably when we'll start to see that. That normally doesn't start switching over to that level until nighttime. It's a little bit easier for them to pull off their dirty shit at nighttime, too.
Yeah.
They're working 12-hour shifts right now. That was announced this morning.
Nice.
Overtime.
Well, then also, there was a good point of people getting off work and now it being the weekend. So, yeah, over these next couple hours, we'll probably see that crowd double or triple. And
how do you have that much money for
cops?
And you can't get more cops so others don't have to do overtime?
Well, I mean, that's the same as, like, Kansas, their El Dorado prison, that they keep on having riots there and shit. And they're completely understaffed, so instead of fixing that problem and giving raises or anything like that, now they just got these officers doing 16-hour shifts. And then that affected yard time for the prisoners, so that's quite common in the law enforcement world, is to, instead of taking some pressure off of the officers that are on there, they actually double the pressure, which in turn makes everything dangerous, or more dangerous for the people as well, because then you got these cops doing these long shifts and they're agitated. They want to go home. They're tired too.
Hey, nobody's stopping them from going home. Nobody. Right? They got a union. They could say, hey, I'm overworked. I need to go home. And the union should back them. They back them when they kill people. They won't back them for taking a break.
Well, that's that grunt work that goes back to, we were going to talk about it 2 weeks ago with the keeping police officers around the country at right about that average IQ level, the grunts. So to a lot of those officers, I'm sure there's a couple that are in their head thinking, man, fuck this, I could leave right now. But I guarantee you the majority, that's not even a thought in their head that they could quit or leave or go home, or it's just that brainwashed.
Too stupid, yeah.
Yeah, honestly, that's what it is, too fucking stupid. I hate to use the word stupid.
But
it
fits.
Pretty much, yeah. I don't know. The more and more, because I get this question a lot, and I get this debate a lot of, like, what about the good cops? And at one point in time, I used to fucking say that bullshit, but these days, like, Tim, if I fucking watch you rape someone right now, and I don't do anything about it, am I still a good person? How many of these cops are good people if they're letting their fellow officers get away with this shit? I just don't see any of them being good people anymore.
Yeah, I did a whole little thing about good apples and how they spoil the whole bunch. And then all you have left is bad apples.
That's just how I feel. If I know that you just killed someone, or that you just hurt someone, you raped someone, you did whatever, and I did nothing to interfere, I view it as I'm just as guilty as you are.
Yeah, when you're not a cop, it's called accessory.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. If it, another example, if you would have killed Anthony, and I was Stockley's partner, and I'd be sitting in jail with you. If we weren't cops and we would have done the exact same shit, me and you would both be in jail.
Yep. Hey, for the people out there, just in case you forget, if these cops start getting crazy and they're wearing those stupid ass helmets with the shields, and it gets necessary, a little bit of paint can blind them. They have to take their helmets off.
Oh,
gives
shit.
you an advantage. Just letting people know.
I never even thought about that. That's fucking brilliant.
Yeah, they used to, in other countries, I've seen them take paint buckets, like the house paint, pound dry ice into it, and then close it back up, and it explodes and hits all the cops' helmets with paint everywhere, and they can't see. And then when they have to take off their helmets, they're more vulnerable to attack if need be.
Yeah. Well, in all reality, that would even work when they throw on the gas mask to start tear gassing.
Yep, paint. It's an old tactic. Pro tip.
Tim, really good ideas.
I'm wondering if they're going to use the tear gas tonight, because I know St. Louis got in trouble back in Ferguson for that, but I bet we'll probably see.
Oh, they don't care. They got in trouble for not having their badges shown. So yeah, they already used tear gas just last week. They used tear gas. I think it was Tuesday night, actually, this week.
Well, one thing that was interesting, I was in Phoenix for that Trump rally, and they actually used yellow tear gas on us there, which I had not seen that before. They call it fire gas, and it works quicker, faster, and longer, and stronger. Fire gas, that ain't no bullshit. They already made a good product with tear gas, and they went ahead and bumped it up when they did fire gas. So I'm almost curious, after seeing that in Phoenix, if we're not going to start seeing that yellow tear gas start popping up in these situations around the country more often.
Anything to hurt the angry people that are protesting injustice, right?
And I'm telling you, man, that yellow tear gas, like, in all honesty, actually, that reminds me, I need to put some on. I had to go grab a lotion the other day in Florida, because I'm pretty sure that I got chemical burns on my nose from that yellow gas, and then getting sunburns on top of it. I had to get some, like, moisturizing, like, medicated type lotion shit, because I'm pretty sure that I got chemical burns from Phoenix.
Jeez.
Yeah, there should be laws against gassing people.
Well, there is internationally.
That should
goes to show
I mean, laws
how
that
much
they
more fucked up it
enforce.
is.
Laws are not enforced
Well,
against police. Doesn't matter what the law is.
That's true too. One thing in D.C. during the inauguration when I was there, after everything, we were at a bar relaxing. I was talking with this dude that he was living over in Palestine for a minute. We just got on the subject of all this shit and started talking about Ferguson and tear gas, and then he started talking about Palestine and tear gas, and I pulled up some of the pictures on our Twitter that I have of the canisters that we were recovering. Then he pulled up pictures of the canisters he recovered, and it was really strange to see that in Palestine they were getting tear gas with the exact same canisters we were getting tear gas with in Ferguson.
It makes sense, though.
And I believe, if I remember correctly, I believe the company's out of Pennsylvania that makes it. But yeah, we were in two separate parts of the world. We were getting hit with the same American-made tear gas.
Not surprised. You wonder how many American police departments have training or tools that are used also by Israel. We know the New York Police Department has a base there, so it's not surprising.
Well, I wouldn't put it as surprising. I guess it's just almost more surreal or like a rude awakening, I guess, just seeing that verification. Just somebody that was there, he's showing you these pictures and just, I don't know, like face to face. Because I don't know, I always think it's more interesting to see something face to face because you're somewhat numbed down just watching it through a screen. So actually talking to someone and then really realizing that's what happened, yeah, it definitely wasn't surprising. It was just, I guess, a rude awakening would kind of sum it up. Maybe verification. I don't even know the words for it. I don't. Honestly, I'm finding myself at a loss of words more and more every day as this shit continues to just basically go up in flames.
Yeah, I just want the people to be safe. I could care less about the police. They caused all this. And they got all the power and they got all the rights out there. And the people who suffer injustice are just going to get more injustice.
Well, one problem too, though, like even with the revolution, is that people themselves are inherently evil. So I don't even, it's just getting to a point where it's hard to, what could stop just the natural evilness of mankind? I mean, we're the ones that figured out that we could rip each other apart by tying each other to two horses and having them run. We did some horrendous things to each other during the medieval times. So, I mean, is there even a way to stop these sort of injustices and shit at all? I mean, what happens if we do have a revolution, then there's a new order of power? How long will it be until those human urges and self-serving agendas start popping up, and then we may even go to a worse situation?
Could go worse, could go better. But I think once you get that far, if something starts to happen like a new government, you need to make sure it's transparent and it's for the people and it doesn't vary or stray from the ideals that the people want.
Well, really, that's where we should start looking back to the more Native American ways and the community ways and the not self-serving, the trying to, you don't make rice and beans for you. You make rice and beans for everybody surrounding you in that area. You fucking, I don't know, just that taking care of each other thing that we seem to lose over time.
I think one thing that needs to be also look at history. Look at the why of this. Why does this keep happening? Like the French Revolution, it was the utter sickness of monarchy. People were sick of the monarchy doing whatever they wanted and spending all the people's money. And then they had a revolution about it. We need to look at why this is the way it is. And why is the white supremacy that this nation was founded on and has maintained every day since. And that white supremacy ties into sexism, bigotry against the LGBTQ community, poverty, classism. And that's the key, is looking the cause, white supremacy, in the eye and going after it. It's like the Kaepernick protests. I mean, you keep seeing people, black people and Indian people, at protests wearing Chiefs jerseys or Red Slur jerseys. You even have people on Washington's team and Kansas City's team doing, kneeling. You're like, well, you're part of the problem, though, at the same time. When you look at the core and the root of the problem, and not just things that, even speaking about my folks, not just worrying about us, when there's a whole another group of people as bad off as we are, and it's been that way since we were both put together on this land. We have to go after white supremacy and any of its forms. We cannot apologize for or defend.
Yeah. I'm looking
Thankfully,
for news.
these.
I finally got Twitter back up on my phone.
Thankfully, I don't see any violence. I got 2 streams up. I'll put them in the chat.
Well, but again, though, I think we're gonna see a different beast take over as we go to nighttime.
Most likely.
One thing that was really hard to control with Ferguson is the youth. And there was several times when I went out there that I would stay at this church in it was East St. Louis. It was the ghetto of St. Louis. Very, very torn down, neglected area. The guy at the church was doing the best that he can, but he explained to me a lot that the problem is that you have this African American community that's just been basically shit on by the city of St. Louis, and then you have the fathers who are either in jail or they've been killed, and then you have these dealers and these gangbangers and shit that see these vulnerabilities in the youth, and the youth are already angry. Their mom's working 2 jobs to keep the family alive and just keep a roof over their head. And they take that vulnerability and they take that anger and give them kind of a distorted way of laying it out. And that was one of the big problems with that the elders were having in Ferguson, was just the blind anger and rage from the youth and trying to stop them from just, like earlier, I don't remember if that was before the show or not, we were talking about the locals not having their stores broken and shit and busted into, and that's one of those things that just comes with that blind anger and rage that just has no direction whatsoever. They just go out there and fuck up everything around them because of that lack of direction. And so I imagine with it being Friday night, we'll probably see more of these angry youth start showing up as we head into the nighttime of St. Louis.
Yeah, it would be so simple to make them not angry, but people can serve justice or, keep a community out of poverty. People are going to be angry.
It boils down to they have perfect right to be angry. Somebody needs to stop taking advantage of them and looking at as strengthening their gang or whatever. I can use this kid to fucking push more dope out. Somebody needs to stop taking advantage of these youth and start showing them how they can use it.
To guide their anger in a positive direction where they're fighting the real enemy instead of each other, or just doing things out of I think a planned attack is always better than just mayhem.
Well, that's one of the problems too on the side with St. Louis is that a lot of people still talk about how bad Chicago is, but St. Louis murders are through the roof right now, and there's a lot of senseless murders. You're not talking about just robberies and shit. You're talking about people just killing just to kill. There's no gain. There's no taking the wallet afterwards. There's no robbing them at the ATM. It's just literally killing to kill, which is where you get that mayhem aspect, which is definitely makes this round with St. Louis definitely volatile than any of the things we've seen in that city in the past.
Yeah, I don't know about killing to kill. That's odd. People usually kill for some kind of
gangs. It's gangs.
Stuff.
It's things along those lines. It's living in horrible poverty. It's one of the biggest issues which we see in any area along these lines is when you know that, sociologically speaking, if the people that are in power aren't being held accountable, then you see crime rates go up. And we see that constantly in St. Louis, where nobody's ever held accountable for anything, whether it's the police or the politicians or anything along those lines.
But you know who is held accountable is those gangsters.
Yes, absolutely.
Who's killing each other. They don't get off.
No, they don't. But there's a lot.
I asked this earlier. Do you, by chance, know? Do we have like another Ferguson thing where the gangs are calling a current truce in St. Louis to come together?
I've not seen it yet, but I wouldn't doubt it.
See, and that's kind of how I felt about it. I'm pretty sure that they have. They normally seem to be pretty good at putting their shit to the side in situations like this.
You guys brought up a good point about how gang members and drug dealers, they're put in these positions and almost sometimes that life is glorified. I mean, you had the powers that be come to Ricky Ross, this major drug dealer, Michael K. Williams, back in the 90s and the 80s and 90s. And they said, hey, you want to make like millions of dollars and sell some stuff?
See,
put it in the community?
That's what the pastor of this church was saying, especially in those poverty areas. They see their single mother working 2-3 jobs, struggling to pay for this shithole house and barely keep food on the table. And they see the dude up the street rolling in the super nice car, fucking got everything he needs, a pocket full of money. And I mean, just naturally, with how this society is, you're going to look at the two options and, okay, do I want to bust my ass every day to struggle? Or do I want to be like this over here and be living well, and then I can take care of everybody? I can take care of my mom. She can quit then. She don't have to work 3 jobs for us anymore. And so it's that poverty issue definitely helps. Just
that's how it's always
furthering.
Been.
Yeah, it 100% has, and it really hurts when you're looking at areas like St. Louis and Baltimore and things like that, where the African American community, a lot of people say it's bullshit, but all they got to do is go down there and fucking look. I get it that if you work double hard, you can get out of there, you can change the situation, but that is not always the situation. There's only so many people that get out of these poverty-stricken areas.
It's a very few, very few.
Very few.
Well,
and if you're in any way, sorry.
Oh no, you're good. You go ahead.
If you're in any way challenged, if you have a disability, if you have a sickness like MS or something like that, you're never getting out. Okay, you're not ever getting out. So that, on top of being poor and a person of color, that's another whole issue that really keeps people down in our society, the way our healthcare system is structured. So I think that we need to address that as well. Like, there's so many people who are suffering from mental illness, from MS or fibromyalgia or cancer, that cannot get a break because they are consistently paying these extravagant and exorbitant hospital bills and medical bills. So even if they work 2 or 3 jobs, they're never going to get out.
Well, and, some people look at the numbers and they'll see, anywhere from 20,000 to 50,000 a year. And while, yes, it's still low, they think that should be enough to still be able to further yourself, which in a lot of situations it can be if you use it right. But what they don't realize is that $20,000 to $50,000 is normally supporting a full family. That's not just going towards one person. And that's especially rings true in these Native American reservations where you see even lower. You see $12,000 a year, very common, 60% and up of a lot of these reservations, like Standing Rock and Pine Ridge and shit like that.
And let's not forget the Navajo reservations down south and the, all of the California reservations here that are really poor. I'd like to respect the Lakota Nation, but I believe they get a lot of attention, and I'd like to highlight some other nations that don't get any, like the Dene, the Navajo, who also have incredible water problems. They've been contaminated by mining for 20 plus years, and we don't hear a peep about that. But Flint is all over the news. Even while Flint is going on, we're yelling about this contamination of our water down south in the Dene reservations, and no one hears us. So, it's really frustrating to be a Native American person while a lot of attention is focused on certain groups like Standing Rock. There's still so many other issues all over Turtle Island that need to be addressed. Missing, murdered Indigenous women, AIDS, diabetes, the crime rate on the reservation, alcoholism, drug addiction. Now the opiate addiction has really taken over the reservations. It's just rampant there. It's unbelievable, like the challenges that we have as Native people.
Well, there's 2 that you're going to see really take over is the opiate for obvious reasons. Even us going into Afghanistan.
That's why
now America is using 90% of the opiate resources of the world. So opiates is one that you're going to see really growing because of the government influence. And then the other one is methamphetamines, because over these last couple of years, even the cartels are switching over to methamphetamines a lot more than coke like they used to because of just basically the cost efficiency. Meth is very cheap. It's very quick.
You can cook it in a bathtub. You don't need much. You know what I mean? Like, you don't even need to make good meth, honestly.
Yeah, so it's a very smart business decision for these cartels to switch over to methamphetamines instead of keep on risking their ass with the cocaine. And they're making more money hand over fist. And so is these cartels and our government agencies, which are basically one and the same, are putting more focus on these opiates and methamphetamines. Obviously, you'll see more of that abuse with the people, especially in these poverty-stricken areas where obviously drugs and poverty, basically walk hand in hand.
Well, yeah, because you don't want to be in this world. You want to get a break from reality. We're having a huge problem with heroin. Heroin is huge too. Heroin, people who can't afford the opiates can't afford heroin because it's much cheaper. So they go from Norco or Oxycontin to heroin. And now we have a huge heroin problem where I live and all over the country. In fact, it's really becoming a huge problem. So you've got heroin, opiates, methamphetamines, and then alcohol as usual, which no one seems to address, which really kind of bothers me.
No, that's just because it's too embedded into our society.
I know.
It has too much money. Mm-hmm. On a bright side, because I was a little worried there about a year or 2 back, that crocodile was really going to blow up here a bit more than it did. At one point, it was actually one of the top searches on Google was how to make crocodile.
Shit was awful.
If nobody's familiar with crocodile, it originates from one of the worst heroin areas in the world over in Russia. It's basically a moonshine heroin where the main ingredient with it is red phosphorus, and it's called crocodile because it actually causes a necrosis of the skin which is the depth of your skin, which looks very familiar to crocodile skin. The
Your
average
skin just melts
lifespan for
off. Oh,
yeah, the average lifespan of a crocodile user is roughly 1 year. But the place where this originated from over in Russia is, I mean, these people that use crocodile have nothing left. They're drug addicts. They normally owe money to people that will kill them as soon as they find them. Not a question of if they'll kill them. They will kill them. So these guys already have nothing left to live for. They don't have the money to buy actual heroin, and crocodile is a cheap and easy answer to that problem. The high is supposed to be very intense and short-lived, but they did find that if they put eye drops in with the shots, that it actually makes it last a bit longer, but it also speeds up the necrosis of the skin. And there was a minute there where I believe it was Chicago, there was heroin users being warned because they were being sold crocodile without even being told. And like I said, that was one of the top Google searches there for a minute, about a year or two back, was how to make crocodile. So hopefully that one doesn't come back around and that one just kind of stays at end. Because I think it takes 30 minutes to make, if I remember correctly. And it's basically just shaking a jug of red phosphorus with a couple of their chemicals. A very, very dangerous moonshine form of heroin.
Wow.
So but as we watch this opiate epidemic continue to grow and we continue to push it on people, I mean, now even I believe it's children as young as 12 can be prescribed oxys. You're going to start seeing this turn to crocodile in other areas or other more dangerous substitutes, just as they can't afford to keep up with these other addictions.
Yeah. You guys, we've been like almost 30 minutes over, so we should probably wrap it up soon. So I guess whoever has stuff to finish off and say at the end, let's do that.
say thanks for having me, guys. So thank you and have a fantastic day. I'll see you soon. Gear
All right.
out.
Hey, yeah, you were awesome to listen to, by the way. You got your shit together. That was you're definitely.
Thank you very much.
I like you.
Nice to hang out with you guys. You're all amazing, amazing people, and I love you all. So take care. Top Gal, talk to you Sunday if you're around. Bye guys.
Love you too, Gear. Take care.
I think Top said he left. I was looking when I was checking to see who was still here. After Glenn left, Top said he was leaving. So yeah, I guess Gail, Nolan, or Miko, anything else you want to add before we go?
Well, go ahead.
Oh, you want to go?
Yeah,
rock, scissors, before it.
Take it.
The only thing that I'd really say is, because everything else seems to be gaining attention, as far as like helping people out, Texas definitely needs help more than Florida. They need help with clearing out these houses. There's still areas that have water in the houses. Irma's main problems are down in Key West. Right now, I don't even think civilians are allowed to go over there. And a lot of Florida's main problems have to do with tree removal and the power still being out. But in Texas, there are things that you can go and do right now, and they definitely need, even if it's just passing out water bottles. And then the other one would be these fires that are going on. If you want to help out with that at all, one big thing that's really looked over with these huge fires is socks. These firemen blow through socks like no other, and they can, if you want to donate something towards those that are fighting the fires, remember that you can send out some fresh pairs of socks, and that could do wonders for somebody that's been out there for 2 weeks solid, and their feet are blistering and all of that. So
yeah,
with the attention everything else is getting, I'd say that's, yeah, I'd say that would be the only thing that I want to throw in. And that you guys are awesome, and I imagine I will probably see you next week then, as long as I'm not somewhere keeping you from doing that.
Cool. Yeah, we always appreciate it when you can make it. Anything, last thing you want to throw in there, Nolan?
Well, speaking about all the messed up stuff that the country puts in our communities, one of those things through conditioning and brainwashing, teaching young black kids, especially black women, that their hair is so disgusting. Of course, in actuality, it's freaking beautiful. But so they straighten their hair, and they use these horrible chemicals to do so. And I remember watching this documentary with a friend of mine that she suggested. They showed the chemical that they use to straighten the hair, and they put a Coca-Cola bottle in or can, and all the red Coke label was washed off, and then they put like a little more in another one, and like it broke apart. So we're damaging our hair all the time, especially our women, to look white, to conform, because that's been beaten into our heads for so long. And what we're born with isn't beautiful at all. So we need to look like white people in order to look halfway decent. But one thing I always thank God for is Malcolm X, his book, and that movie Spike Lee made changed my life when I was a teenager and made me realize, wait a minute, black is beautiful. The nappy hair is pretty cool. Skin tone, pretty cool. Your dad's even much darker skin tone. Very, very cool. I'll just leave it at that, and I'll say Free Palette.
School Days, right?
Malcolm X movie.
Oh, okay.
Spike Lee's, yeah, Malcolm X movie. If anybody's not seen that movie, go watch that movie. And if anybody hasn't read that book, the autobiography about Malcolm X, read that book. And I'll just close in saying, Tim, I love you. Thanks as always for having me on the show. And Free Palestine and peace, y'all. Have a good weekend.
Cool. Thanks for listening, everybody.